Suicide bombers attack a government building in Libya. DRC opposition parties hold a media briefing ahead of the rescheduled poll. And still in the DRC, a deadly bus accident claims 27 lives. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Raman Young with a preview of your business news.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. MTN settles an $8 billion dispute with Nigeria's central bank for just about $53 million. And Egypt won't be getting its hands on the latest installment of a $12 billion loan from the IMF just yet. We'll explain why in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Lindy.
Thanks, Roma. Well, let's start the hour in Libya, where at least 3 people have been killed after militants attacked Libya's foreign ministry in the capital, Tripoli. 11 others were wounded in the attack. Most of the victims are ministry employees. The Tuesday incident is being attributed to ISIL, though no one has claimed responsibility as yet. Now, according to security agencies, attackers gained access to the building after detonating a car bomb outside the ministry offices. 2 militants then blew themselves up after entering the building. The Libyan government has condemned the attack. Well, let's get some perspective on this attack and the broader political crisis in Libya. We're joined now by Dr. Ziad Akhil. He's a political analyst and research center at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies. Dr. Akhil, always a pleasure having you with us. This indeed, of course, a brazen attack on a vital government ministry. What does this attack say about just how vulnerable Libya has become amidst the ongoing power struggle?
Well, first of all, welcome to you and all your viewers. It is indeed very unfortunate that still the status of security in the West, in Tripoli, is not safe enough for Libyan citizens and is not safe enough for the region. This basically says that there is a struggle between different small militarized or militant groups inside of the Libyan West. And this is essentially the result of the fragmentation of the military alliances that once existed in the West. And this means that we will start witnessing in the Libyan West in the coming period a lot of these small operations, small terrorism operations, because first of all there are no enough alliances between military forces, and at the second hand there are no more the pattern of territorial terrorism where, for example, Daesh was controlling Sirte for example. So small operations, suicide bombers, even simple weapons that can simply give the impression to the Libyan citizen that he or she is not living in safety. This will be seen in Tripoli as a result of the ongoing power struggle there and the absence of a central security institution.
Well, as you mentioned, you're talking about these small militarized groups, but of course, on the government level, there's 2 rival administrations, one in Tripoli, the other in Tobruk. This particular attack is being attributed to ISIL at this point. Now, when you look at all these different groups and these rival administrations, is there any consensus, any agreement amongst these factions as to how to go about really addressing the challenge that ISIL presents?
Well, of course, you cannot say that there is a government that would sanction or would not want to get rid of such terrorist operations. But if we are talking about coordination, then no, the levels of coordination are very minimal. Communication between the 2 rival governments in the East and in the West has been very much concerned in the last era or in the last few months with the idea of political settlement, with the idea of the UN's role and the planning and the different meetings, whether in Paris or in Rome, and the level of interconnection, the level of domestic dialogue between both countries, between both governments, specifically in such a sensitive file, security related like terrorism, is very low. And this is eventually making some parts of Libya in a vacuum of security, where they do not witness enough security because neither governments control the full of the Libyan East or the full of the Libyan West. And that is why they need to coordinate. And that, of course, is something else other than the Libyan South. So as long as this coordination is not present and is not at a satisfactory level, then the security of the Libyan inside will always be very vulnerable.
Yeah. And of course, Dr. Akil, Libya is looking to hold elections early next year. You talk about this lack of coordination and even just the lack of security in certain places. Does this point to the possibility that these elections are going to be very difficult to hold? It's already looking like a very bumpy road to the poll.
Well, indeed, it's a very difficult step to achieve, and it's almost right now it's quite impossible to hold elections in Libya because of more than one reason. One of them is the fact that Libya still, until today, does not have the organizational capacity to hold an electoral process. At the same time, it does not have sufficient security measures. Thirdly, how can you guarantee that the sovereignty and the legitimacy that these election results will come out with will actually be respected by the different armed groups and militias spread all over the country? So yes, there is a lot of international pressure, and none of the warring parties inside of Libya will say that they do not want to hold elections. No one will oppose the international community, but the facts on the ground, a quick reality check within the Libyan situation tells you that the minimal prerequisites and factors required for democracy are not present in the current scene right now, and therefore elections could actually lead to more division if they are held before these core problems are dealt with.
And of course, this attack today, just another part of that reality check. Thank you so much, Dr. Ziad Akil, joining us there from Cairo. Now, turning to some other news, the Democratic Republic of Congo's Electoral Commission headquarters has been transformed into a makeshift printing plant. 250 voting machines are working around the clock, printing and preparing ballots for the country's rescheduled general elections. Dozens of technicians are overseeing the operations to meet next week's new deadline. And this comes, of course, after a fire destroyed nearly 80% of Kinshasa's controversial voting machines. The cause of the fire has not yet been determined. Of course, major questions remain about how the DRC will be able to successfully use the voting machines in the infrastructure-starved country of 40 million voters, but many are without the adequate computer experience.
I would first like to reassure you that the technical preparations are going quite well. This coming Sunday, the 40 million voters will be invited to come to the 75,781 polling stations throughout the national territory. All the equipment is in the field. There is no district that hasn't received the equipment. We are in the final stages, principally in the city of Kinshasa, where the technical preparations are also going well. We are in a good position to believe that there will not be a boycott. Everybody will participate in these elections. These elections are historic for our country. They will allow for the very first time a peaceful transition of power between an outgoing head of state and an incoming head of state who will emerge from the 21 candidates.
And in some other news coming out of the DRC, at least 27 people are feared to have died after a bus they were traveling in collided with a truck. 17 others were injured. The accident happened in a town called Kisantu, which lies in the Western Democratic Republic of Congo. A health ministry official blamed the accident on speeding. A mother and a baby are among the dead. Well, let's get to the very latest now on these developments in the DRC. I'm joined by CGTN's Leon Senyange. Leon, of course, let's start with the upcoming election. Of course, Christmas Day, a day of rest for many, but clearly not for opposition parties. We understand they held a press briefing today. Just give us an idea of what came out of that discussion.
Well, the press briefing was on early this afternoon. 6 presidential candidates, those that will of course be running in Sunday's particular election, held the press conference, and they were led by Martin Fayul. He is one of the strong contenders in this election. Their major concern was any possibility that the electoral body will be postponing these elections. That has been their major concern since Thursday's announcement. They say that any such occurrence will start trouble, kind of trouble that we definitely may have quite a lot of concerns about. But then again, the other issue that they were brought forward was about the ballot counting. That is on Sundays, after Sunday's voting. So definitely these were some of the major concerns that were in today's press conference. However, the electoral body again says that these concerns by the opposition party should not be anything to cause worry. The electoral body is determined to go forward and hold the election on Sunday.
So, of course, the Electoral Commission trying to appease opposition party leaders. But has there been any word at all from the incumbent president, Joseph Kabila, since the postponement?
Well, not much has definitely come through. Only a few days ago is when he had an interview. He, of course, was talking about his period in the presidency, but just as much talking about how this time round he has been committed towards ensuring that this election goes forward. He, of course, is not in the running for this. He has his front person there, that is Shadari, and
we do apologize for that. It seems we have some technical challenges there with our colleague Leon Senyange. But as we heard there, the opposition parties held a meeting today. There are concerns, of course, regarding the postponement and ballot counting regarding those upcoming elections. Now, meanwhile, traders in the DRC say they've noted a drop in sales in recent months. That's due to the political uncertainty over the elections, which have been rescheduled now for the 30th of December. Fears of an outbreak in violence have slowed business activity in a country whose economy was projected to grow by 3.8%. Here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa with more.
Kamal Mkadam is a trader dealing in household appliances in the DRC capital, Kinshasa. He's among many Congolese business people hoping to cash in on the December shopping frenzy. But not many customers have been buying his products.
Business
has been very slow ever since the election period began. People just pass by to ask prices but don't buy.
Kamal's troubles are shared by other small-scale traders as well.
My business has been really poor since the month began.
Foreign investors worried about the outbreak of violence after the December elections are also reported to have pulled out of deals signed with the DRC government.
For the last 2 or 3 years, there was no way any businessman could plan ahead, not knowing exactly where we're going. One of the last examples we must put on the desk is this Inga tree. Some pre-arrangement was signed with South Africa, and today the Parliament of South Africa has pushed back the decision.
The DRC is rich in minerals, but the majority of its population is poor. The uncertainty surrounding the DRC elections has scared away some investors, a significant setback for an economy that has been projected to grow by 3.8%. The forthcoming election is crucial to millions of Congolese who haven't had a peaceful transfer of power since the country gained independence from Belgium in 1960. Many voters are yearning for a better standard of living and an end to the conflicts in the East. The country's economy relies heavily on the revenue from the export of minerals, an industry that has many foreign-owned firms. Congolese traders like Kamal only hope that the elections on the 30th of December go smoothly to enable their businesses to flourish. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, meanwhile, Christians in the DRC are using Christmas to call for peaceful elections. Religious leaders have actively participated in political developments in the country. With the elections only days away and tensions still high, they're now calling for credibility and inclusivity from all parties in the upcoming polls.
The true peace that comes from Jesus Christ is a peace that requires that elections take place on the date set for December 30th, 2018. To break that promise would be to work for the annihilation of peace.
And time now for a short break. When we come back, we bring you an update on the deadly tsunami in Indonesia. And we tell you all about CGTN's Newsmaker of the Year in Egypt.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Right, let's start in Indonesia now. Saturday's tsunami has crushed the popular beaches on the western tip of the country's Java island. Over 750 buildings were destroyed or damaged, including hotels and villas where thousands of tourists were staying for the holidays. Powerful waves also destroyed some 400 ships and cruisers. Traffic is completely cut off in several remote towns. Rescuers are trying to retrieve more bodies while survivors are grappling with what happened. CGTN's Silkina Alawalia reports from Banten town, where search and rescue operations are underway.
Indonesia's first volcano tsunami in more than 130 years has brought about a new wave of devastation to the country. Authorities are still on high alert as one of the country's largest volcanoes, Krakatau, continues to show increasing activity. Thousands are injured and displaced as a result of the tsunami. This local hospital, located in the Carita district in Pandeglang, are overwhelmed with the amount of victims and bodies being brought in for identification.
The number of deaths is increasing, and we are still using facial identification as conditions are allowing for this. Faces can still be recognized.
As the local hospital in Carita struggles to deal with the increasing number of victims, many of them are being sent to this hospital further into the city for a more thorough inspection.
Many of the victims that are brought to our hospital suffer from broken bones, and most of them with respiratory problems, as the tsunami brought on a sandstorm. So far, we have also operated on a few patients, and many are still expected to be in the operating room today.
President Joko Widodo arrived on location to make sure the teams on the ground are equipped with proper machineries to quicken emergency rebuilding. Dozens are still missing from disaster areas along the coastline of Banten.
The search and rescue team are now focusing their operation on areas that are hard to reach. Many villages that are located near the volcano are still inaccessible, but there are hundreds of people there that are in need of basic necessities.
The National Disaster Mitigation Agency is still advising residents and tourists to stay away from beaches for fear a fresh tsunami could occur as Krakatau continues to erupt. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Banten, Indonesia.
One Egyptian football star has been a prime newsmaker all year long. That's none other than Egyptian national team and Liverpool striker Mohamed Salah. Most pictures have flooded his home country, with millions of fans in Egypt following his games and posts on social media. He's become uniquely loved. Here's Adel Al-Makhraoui with more.
Egypt has been through a lot in 2018. From a nationwide fight on terror to presidential election and hosting international events. There are many newsmakers. However, there is only one who have gained unique admiration from the public. Egyptian national team and Liverpool stars Mohamed Salah.
As he forged his position as one of the top 3 football players in the world, Mo Salah has quickly risen to be the most talked about person here in Egypt all year long. Graffitis of his face like this one have been drawn all over the country, and art exhibitions have been made in his honor. They are a reflection of how much he has inspired so many Egyptians.
No Egyptian has ever reached the fame of football success that Mo has so far made. That has made advertisers here rush to put their brand name next to him.
We are not used to seeing an Egyptian accomplish so much in football in Europe. To play in the Champions League final, to become the best player in the English Premier League, to break the scoring record made by the world's top stars. To many, this was impossible, and he did what was impossible. He's become a brand himself, and on a global level.
With 11 million Facebook fans and more than 7 million on Twitter, nothing Mo does or posts can get unnoticed. He puts on a new clothing style, hundreds of thousands engage. Even shaving his chest becomes the talk of Egyptian fans for days to follow on social media.
Mohamed Salah has the complete attention of his Arab fans, and that was evident in the Club World Cup. Liverpool is not participating, yet we could hear the roars of Arab fans cheering against Real Madrid Sergio Ramos because months ago he tackled and injured Mohamed Salah. Salah has become a role model. It's why they all follow him and look up to him. It's why every move he makes is being followed. No other Arab player has reached his status.
In 2018, he had 2 conflicts with the Egyptian Football Association. During both, Egyptian fans have always backed Mo. After noticing the magnitude of his influence on the youth, the government launched an anti-addiction campaign starring him. The number of patients who decided to quit drugs tremendously rose. Raised from a poor rural village, the story of Mohamed Salah connects with most Egyptians. Many here are looking forward to see him succeed even further. Adel Al-Makhraoui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Egypt has taken numerous steps this year to deepen ties with other African nations. Cairo has intensified political, economic and security dialogue with the continent's leaders as it prepares to chair the African Union in 2019. For more on Egypt's efforts to connect with its African roots and its plans for Africa, our correspondent Adel Al-Makhraoui spoke to Egypt's head of Parliament's African Relations Committee, Tariq Radwan. Let's take a look.
In your opinion, what are the main highlights of Egypt's connectivity with Africa in 2018?
I'd like to highlight on the vision and the mission that was developed by the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to go back to Africa. It's not, we're not inventing a new wheel or something, but it's just a comeback. But I believe that he was very much poised and positioned to make this comeback sounding and very strong. 35% of the President's international visits were to Africa and African countries several times. Yani we're talking about at least 89 trips. The President was very much determined to invite and to bring the African youth and African administration. The military expo that was held in Cairo, 15 defense ministers and chief of staffs were present. He also focused on developing the intertrade agreements between African countries, South-South basis, and using and utilizing the natural resources between all the countries, the African countries, because As you know, the intertrade span between African countries does not extend more than 1%, which is very, I must say, it's very poor.
As you've mentioned, on the governmental level, there has been an intense movement toward Africa. What is exactly the role, or how does the Parliament African Committee fit into that?
The legislative level, which focuses on the interparliamentary relations between African parliaments, that we have started working on that and have in Egypt, and for the first time 90 female representation out of 594. And we have also 170 youth under the age of 35 that are members of the parliament, and we are very much poised in order to enhance youth and women participation in parliaments. Likewise, this is what's happening in Africa, and as I've mentioned, Africa is a young continent with 65% of its population under the age of 25. So this number is big. This number could be a driving power.
So what are the main challenges that you see lie ahead of Egypt to connect more with Africa?
You don't get to see fellow or colleagues from African parliaments, but on international mediums or regional mediums, whether it is the APU, African Parliamentary Union, or the IPU, Interparliamentary Union, and they does not exceed more than 4 times a year, which is very little. So that was a first challenge, because when you want to talk business, when you want to talk about social relation, when you want to talk politics, if you want to talk about investment, if you want to talk about education, if you want to talk about healthcare, it all starts here in the parliament. So we have to enhance interparliamentary relations between African countries. We have to talk and look at each other's eyes in order to identify and put a focus and a compass for what needs to be done.
Egypt is chairing the African Union in 2019. What does Egypt envision to achieve in the coming year?
I've touched with sincere dedication and devotion from the president, and I believe that during the Africa Investment Forum that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, his course of talks and presentation has changed from a president of a country that belonged to Africa to a president or a head of the African Union. So he changed the whole, there has been a dramatic change in the course of addressing even. And he was giving mandates to investors. He was giving opportunities for countries that are aiming to go into Africa using Egypt as a vehicle of presence in the African continent. We have also 90 million Africans suffering from hepatitis B and C. So Egypt has a very strong presence in fighting the virus C in Egypt, and maybe we could transfer our experience and the technology developed to produce the medication to combat virus C. We have also a very active Minister of Investment and International Cooperation. She's looking up to develop businesses worth of at least 80 to 90 billion US dollars the coming year for Africa. So the issue is not money, it's the issue of setting up the proper platform and medium to attract investors.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Your business news up next. Here's Raman Young with the latest.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in business. MTN settles an $8 billion dispute with Nigeria Central Bank for just about $53 million. And we'll explore why Egypt isn't likely to get its hands on the latest installment of a $12 billion loan from the IMF just yet.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are 2 of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Right, then let's start with South Africa's MTN Group. It may finally have resolved a dispute with the Nigerian Central Bank. According to a message that it posted on Twitter on Monday, the telecommunications company made a $52.6 million payment to the CBN and did not admit any liability for any wrongdoing as part of that settlement. Now, Nigeria's Central Bank, remember, had accused MTN of illegally moving $8.1 billion in dividends out of the country paid by MTN Nigeria to its parent company, and this happened between 2007 and 2015. Nigeria is MTN's biggest single market. It accounts for roughly a third of its annual core profit, but it's proven to be deeply problematic in recent years. Around 2 years ago, MTN agreed to pay more than $1 billion to settle a dispute over unregistered SIM cards in Nigeria. In a separate case, however, MTN still faces a $2 billion tax demand from Nigeria's Attorney General. Egypt is expected to receive the fifth installment of a $12 billion loan from the IMF, but those funds may come, if they do come, in January, a month later than initially scheduled. That is amid delays in talks over some elements of the government's economic reform program. Now, one of the key issues is the timing of the announcement about a fuel pricing mechanism. It will essentially link local fuel prices to international ones, and it is a key part of the government's plan to cut costs across the board. Egypt plans to announce a pricing mechanism for 95-octane gasoline by the end of the month, with implementation expected at the end of the first quarter. It will also announce the mechanisms for other fuel grades in June after lifting subsidies, and then implement those new prices by September 2019. However, this move is politically sensitive because the government is trying to strike a balance between the need for fiscal consolidation on one hand and public anger at rising costs on the other. On to West Africa now. Nigeria's government hopes to boost oil output to 2.3 million barrels per day if it is to meet funding targets for its 2019 budget. Earlier this month, the West African oil producer also agreed to take part in production cuts agreed to by OPEC, of which it is a member, although its share of the 1.2 million barrels per day of cuts is not clear. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam explores these contradictions.
Nigeria's $28.8 billion budget proposal for 2019 is pegged to $60 per barrel of crude oil and an output capacity of 2.3 million barrels per day. Its current output is at an average 1.7 million, and quite likely OPEC may ask it to limit output in that range. The government says it wants to ramp up its daily outputs to 2.3 million barrels by early next year. It has projected an additional 100,000 barrels capacity to come upstream by February.
With regard to the oil and the gas sector, crude oil production continued to increase steadily towards budgetary targets and will receive a further boost when the 200,000 barrels per day Egina oil field start operations.
To avert an oversupply, OPEC members agreed to lower daily output by 1.2 million barrels per day. Complying with the OPEC output cut deal could lead to a significant budget deficit.
OPEC requires that we should cut short. And again, people tend to look away from this angle of this shale oil from the US. It's going to be a big disaster when it becomes fully operative, because it's going to mean that OPEC quotas in the oil supply, world oil supply, will drop significantly. And that also means that Nigeria will cut down significantly. So basing a projection on this for 2019, I feel it is not realistic.
OPEC is yet to release output cut quotas for member states. Only Libya, Iran and Venezuela are exempted from the cuts, which will take effect when Nigeria plans to increase output. So far, crude oil prices are at their worst since 2016, and it's difficult to see Nigeria gain by rejecting cuts, and oversupply will simply drive oil prices further below its benchmark of $60 per barrel. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
On to East Africa now, where Ethiopia is working on increasing government revenue by encouraging businesses and citizens alike to pay their taxes. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali officially kicked off this movement, which aims to raise tax compliance right across the country. CGTN's Girum Chala has the details.
Ethiopia, though, has one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. Its tax and revenue collection system remains one of the weakest in the continent. The government wants to change that. The Ethiopian Revenue Ministry has called these taxpayers for a talk aimed at improving their working relationship.
Similar tax and revenue sensitization works will be done in regions in order to ignite the movement across the country. This movement aims to make tax payment a culture in our society, and we expect our people to do more without a doubt to make their country proud.
On his keynote address to Ethiopia's taxpayer business community, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the tax they are paying is crucial to the government.
As the saying goes, sweat saves blood. Paying a tax creates a national capacity that can save many of our lives. The practice of paying tax on time without a doubt benefits our country than doing the reverse. With the tax citizens pay, the government has been expanding the nation's infrastructure, which in return plays a vital role in making the private sector a strong competitor.
According to available data, this year, Ethiopia's Ministry of Revenue has aimed at collecting around $3.2 billion from import tax, while close to $8 billion is expected to be collected from domestic tax, which include salary, dividend, consumption tax, such as 15% VAT, excise and turnover tax. But meeting the plan remains to be a challenge. The Prime Minister emphasized the less performing tax and revenue system needs to change in order to build a stronger nation.
To see a prosperous Ethiopia, to see our model make the country peaceful and secured, and to make Ethiopia a country that can provide the basic needs of its people, we need to change the weak perspective we have about paying tax. A person who hides tax cannot be seen as a modern person. Rather, we not only see that person as a person who hates his country, but also we consider him as a person who is irresponsible about the future of his children. That person is fool.
Ethiopia is extensively working on pro-poor development works, including mega projects which could take the country to the level of a middle-income state in few years' time. The government, however, is short of finance to finish its projects on time. If properly paid, tax money is believed to solve problems. Girum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
One final story for you. Over in the United States, a budget standoff over a border wall does continue as the country enters day 3 of a partial government shutdown. Democrat leaders in Congress say the two sides remain, in their words, very far apart. Now, the Senate will not be meeting again until Thursday, so if no vote does occur, the shutdown will last right into 2019. CGTN's Owen Fairclough filed this update.
The US capital, Washington, D.C. is even emptier than usual for this time of year, with hundreds of thousands of government employees forced to take a leave of absence as the US government is in partial shutdown, a shutdown that US President Donald Trump has taken personal ownership of. The US President opting to stay in Washington, D.C. to oversee this crisis and engage in some horse trading over how much funding he can get for the border wall with Mexico that he's promised his supporters ever since he became president. He wants anywhere from between $1 and $5 billion, but opposition lawmakers stand in his way. Trump has opted to stay in Washington, D.C. and tweeted out, "I am all alone, poor me," in the White House, waiting for the Democrats to come back and make a deal on desperately needed border security. This is by no means the first US shutdown this year, but it is one in which Trump has put himself front and center. So let's take a look at some of the details All of this triggered by that border wall impasse with Congress. The main employers' union for the federal government estimates that some 420,000 employees are being forced to work without pay for now. They're considered essential employees, but worth noting that not all government departments here have shut down. The Department of Defense is fully funded, as is the Post Office, so they're not affected by all of this. Well, Trump's acting chief of staff was forced to admit that this government shutdown might not be over this year.
I want everybody to understand no one is working without getting paid. Paychecks go out on the 28th. The next pay period that is impacted is January 11th. I think it's very possible that this shutdown will go beyond the 28th and into the new Congress.
And right now, we have fears of a recession that are contributing to a massive stock market sell-off. Now we have a US government that's only partially functioning. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour, though. We'll dive into a lot more analysis on that long-awaited deal between Nigeria's central bank and MTN. How did we get from a dispute over $8 billion to a settlement of $52.6 million in the span of about 12 months or so? Some answers coming to you live from Lagos at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Roma. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the programme. When we return, a look back at Africa's 2018 fashion trends.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Looking back at the year that was, every year the fashion world bursts at the seams to outdo the previous year's iconic pieces, and 2018 was no different. African designers presented show-stopping creations that pushed the global fashion game into wild and edgy territory. Let's take a look at how designers on the continent stitched their way through 2018.
Kicking off Africa's Year in Fashion was South African Menswear Week in Cape Town, an event that has come to epitomize what is edgy and fashion-forward on the continent. But there's a rip in the seam when it comes to mentoring and promoting young designers.
I think that we really need to pay attention to young African fashion designers in terms of providing, in fact, a lot of the countries in Europe and in the US are taking a lot of ideas from African designers. And I think that the more we can create platforms for them to express their creativity, the better for them to create economic opportunities in the industry.
Crossing over to West Africa, Nigeria hosted one of Africa's biggest fashion events, attracting over 45 designers from 14 countries worldwide, as well as supermodel Naomi Campbell, making a big statement about the uniqueness of African designs.
I don't think that we're more important because we're being discovered by the outside. We always were important. We've always worn these clothes. It is interesting and nice that we're getting noticed for our things, but it's nothing new to us. We've always dressed like this. We've got a lot of style. It's nothing new, and the world is lucky that they're getting to see what we've done all this time.
Ghana has also caught the international fashion spotlight due to celebrity endorsements and fast-rising fashion designers.
I have a lot of aspirations on taking my brand to a bigger global platform to reach more people, because we've gotten to the point when we've got so much good stuff here. I've got so much good stuff here, and as a Ghanaian designer, we should be pushing to make sure that you could walk into a store in New York, maybe a Walmart or any other store in New York or Paris, and be able to find something that's from Ghana.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, activists delimited global fashion by presenting models with special needs on the catwalk as part of an initiative aimed at fighting for inclusive representation in fashion.
Sometimes we see ourselves as people who do not have much value. We see ourselves as lesser than. But because of this event, I have regained confidence in myself. I can walk on the runway and forget that I have disability and forget about that complex.
In East Africa, costume designer Skola Namwai showcased her latest collection, hoping to change mass market perception on fashion in Kenya.
I was searching myself and trying to find out what I really liked or what I really wanted to do. And I was always into fashion in high school. I loved modeling, I loved creating designs from t-shirts and fabric at home. My mom was a seamstress, and every time after school we would go to where she was training as a dressmaker. And I would collect pieces of fabric in the market and make some clothes for my doll.
With such diverse and talented designers hard at work across the continent, 2019 and beyond could present a blank creation canvas to celebrate unique and strong African fashion. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
In the Horn of Africa, young people have embarked on a mission to rebrand Somalia. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello explains why youth in the country are tired of the everyday narrative that paints their country in a bad light.
The exhibition in Mogadishu attracted mostly young people. Organizers say that the theme for this year's Photo Voice exhibition is social inclusion. The 3-month exercise brought together students and local residents to raise awareness on a broad range of issues affecting the community. Participants provided photos depicting daily life challenges facing both children and grown-ups in a nation emerging from decades of conflict. Sabrina Awais is one of the several young people who displayed their photos at this exhibition. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and Sabrina's choice of these photos speaks volumes. School-going girls demonstrating against Al-Shabaab following Somalia's deadly terrorist attack last year.
I saw the girls and they were young. My guess is they were either 15 or 16 years old, and they were chanting anti-Al-Shabaab slogans, condemning terrorism and its perpetrators. My choice of this picture also reveals that women too take part in nation building.
The photos were displayed at the Mogadishu Peace Garden, a symbol of hope for a city often associated with deadly bombings and targeted killings.
Every picture had a story behind it, and we captioned each and every one of them. The message in all of them is that Somalis are resilient people, hopeful, ready to emerge from the chains of conflict, and can play a role in stabilizing their own country. That's why we displayed it here in public, for everyone to come and take part.
Local photographers across the country have also embarked on a massive campaign to rebrand their country's lost glory. Through photography, cameramen like Mukhtar Noor and many others' primary focus is showcasing the positive features and images of Somalia. When you search Somalia on the internet, all that comes up are scenes of bombing, drought and famine. And it's for this reason that young people have made it their own initiative to change that perception and are now filling social media sites with beautiful and positive images of Somalia in a bid to change the decades-long stereotype that's mostly being enforced by Western media. For instance, this beautiful mountain known as Al-Madu is located in northern Somalia, and if local photographers like Mukhtar didn't place it on social media, no one will ever realize that this place exists. For now, young people continue to flood Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and other social media platforms with positive images that tell an entirely different story of a better and a promising future for Somalia. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, time for a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, South Africa prepares for the Ice Hockey World Championships set for next month.
Ayo Champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
In your sports news, South Africa's women's ice hockey team is gearing up for the World Championships in Cape Town in January. The squad has been training in Pretoria to prepare for the tournament. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
South Africa will field a young side when it plays host to the Women's Ice Hockey World Championships in Cape Town next year. The country has been developing players over the last decade to compete against the sport's best teams.
About 10 years ago, we started a development cycle and we started really looking at bringing in the best players and the players that are going to do well in the future. So, yeah, and development, but also the younger players are coming in with real athleticism, a higher skill level than what we've probably seen in the game before. And because of that, they're a positive attribute to the team. So they're there because they're good enough to be there.
We've got a lot of 15 to 20-year-olds. What that does for the development of the sport, it means that in 10 years' time, those 15-year-olds are now 25, they're in the peak of their game, and they've already been in the national team for 10 years. So the future of our sport looks incredible.
The squad's determination and home soil advantage could strengthen their chances of progressing in the tournament.
Being selected at such a young age, I feel like I can bring energy and ambition to the sport, and I can also encourage even younger players to see that they don't have to be much older to be on the team.
The younger players definitely bring the energy, the new generation hockey, because we definitely learn from the older players, but we also bring something new in that other players can also learn from.
But they've been drawn against Belgium, Bulgaria, Hong Kong and the Ukraine, which could make life a little tricky for the host nation. South Africa is ranked 32. They will be looking to improve on this and to beat a third-place result from the 2018 championships.
We want to win, but our success is going to be measured by key moments. And what we're looking for is just a team that goes out and does their best. Our first game is against Ukraine, our next one's against Belgium, and those are two teams that are higher than us in terms of probably the world order. But in big games, team bogs down and makes it difficult to play against. And if we do that, we'll have positive results.
The winning team will qualify for Group B World's Women Ice Hockey Championships in Romania in 2019. Julie Shara, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
And staying in South Africa, the country's national cricket team will play Pakistan in a 3-match test series that starts on Boxing Day in Centurion. Now, the Proteas will use this occasion to begin their journey to reclaiming the #1 ranking, while Pakistan will be looking to win their first test in South Africa in over 10 years. CGTN's Zias du Plessis has more.
South Africa's international season gets underway on Boxing Day against an unpredictable Pakistan in what promises to be a hard-fought series between two talented teams. The home side are without bowlers Vernon Philander and Lungi Ngidi, but captain Faf du Plessis believes that the series will be decided by the batsmen and not so much the bowlers.
Yeah, it's the same thing as every team coming here. If your batters can do well, then you have a chance. But for us, obviously, we see that as an opportunity as well. Pakistan does have an opportunity there when if you can get them in trouble early on. There is a little bit of something there in the middle order that you can work with. So it's just about making sure that hopefully we start well and put some doubts early in the series.
Veteran fast bowler Dale Steyn requires just one more wicket to surpass Sean Pollock's long-standing record of 421 test wickets to become the Rainbow Nation's leading wicket taker. But the 35-year-old was quick to shift the focus onto the test instead of his pending personal achievement.
No, I've said for many times now, I think I've got a lot more wickets in me than just one more, So I haven't saved up myself to take one more than Polly. There's a big goal or life plan at the end of the day, So But I think it would be a beautiful thing to happen for me.
The man known as the Palabora Express says the goal will be to reclaim the #1 test ranking, but knows the Proteas, who have held the top spot in the past, will need to be clinical and show some killer instinct to achieve that goal.
If things go according to plan for us and we go 3-0 up, and things don't go according to plan for, say, India in Australia, there's a big chance that we could be the #1 test team in the world at the end of this summer. Sri Lanka come here, I think we owe them a little bit from the series that we had there. So to win 5 test matches on home soil would be the ultimate goal.
The much anticipated first test will see 2 teams at contrasting stages in their development. The Proteas chasing the #1 test spot, while Pakistan are team rebuilding. And if history is anything to go by, South Africa should be comfortable winners based on the fact Pakistan have only won 2 test matches ever on South African soil, with the last one coming back in 2006. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Centurion.
And the English football now. Arsenal midfielder Henrik Mkhitaryan has been ruled out for up to 6 weeks with a broken foot. Mkhitaryan was replaced at half-time during Arsenal's English League Cup quarter-final loss to Tottenham and missed the team's Premier League win over Burnley. Mkhitaryan has scored 4 goals and provided 3 assists this season. He joins an Arsenal injury list, which also includes striker Danny Welbeck and defender Rob Holding, neither of whom are expected to return until the 2019-2020 campaign. And in Major League Soccer, former Ajax and Inter Milan manager Frank de Boer has been hired as head coach of MLS champions Atlanta United. The Dutchman replaces Tata Martino, who announced in October that he'd be leaving Atlanta United after winning the club's first title. Former Dutch international and Ajax and Barcelona defender de Boer worked in the Premier League as manager of Crystal Palace, but lasted only 4 league games. However, it was his record of developing young players at Ajax that's impressed the MLS club. Well, that's a wrap of your sports news, and it is where we